Alright, let's do our mock assessment. So we've got a bunch of stuff already built. So take note that there is a GameDB class that has some data in it already. That way we don't have to bother with Entity Framework or SQL Server Management Studio or anything like that. We can just focus on building the controllers and the API, and the model layer is basically done for us. So we've already got a player class with an ID, a username, a level, blah, 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 blah. And this is a foreign key, so it has reference to its player class with the constructor, and then the player class has its ID, and then it also has a constructor. So we've already got our model made up, and then we have this file GameDB, that allows us to basically have all this data at our fingertips without having to use SQL or anything like that. So the main point then is that most of our coding for this lab is going to be inside this gaming controller. So that way we don't have to really worry about the other stuff. Alright, so let's just go through this down the line and see what we can do. Alright, so in your API, create the following endpoints. Players, an endpoint that returns all players. Alright, sweet. Alright, so it will be a get because the person who's making this request is asking for information, right? So a get is when you have to think about in terms of the person that is hitting the APIs, right? So our API sits somewhere, it doesn't do anything. Someone comes along and makes a request. They're the client. Okay, the client's request is for information. They want us to give them information, so we're going to use get in those circumstances. So public action result get all players. All right. Here is the thing that might have some confusion because in the past we've used asynchronous. In the terms of this mock assessment, it doesn't really matter. You can do this if you want to do it asynchronously. So remember the async keyword and then the task, and then you put iActionResult as the type. That's fine. You could do it this way, or you could do it synchronously this way without async task. Okay, so this would be the synchronous way of writing this endpoint, and then the way I just did it would be the asynchronous way. We don't care in terms of this mock assessment. I don't care which one you do because it doesn't really matter. The reason it doesn't matter is because the data storage is a class that's already in our app. Like there's no chance of us failing to get any data or for this to take a long time. Async is really all about you make a request and then you don't necessarily know how long it's going to take before that request is fulfilled because it requires calling a database and network traffic. That's a real world situation. If you did everything synchronously, then you might make people who are the first in line have to get their stuff done before the people in the back of the line can get the request even looked at. Asynchronous allows everyone to come up to the front and say, hey, I want to use this endpoint, and then whenever you get done processing my request, come back to me. So in terms of this mock assessment, it just does not matter because this is our data store. There it is. There's no network communication. There's no, this isn't a server that takes time to make a request. It's just a class. So I'm going to do all these synchronously. So I don't need the async keyword. I don't need that. I'm just going to use iActionResult. And I'm going to get all players. All right, so DB is my variable that gets the players, so I'm going to do a list of players. Remember, it's a list because I have more than one. DB dot, I think it has a players. Cool. All right, so I have a list of players, and then I can return OK players. Now, you may not remember what this OK does. So before, in regular MVC, we had this view function. We want to return the view. Well, this is an API. There's nothing to look at. It just returns data. There's nothing to see, per se. So we have these keywords like OK, which basically return a status code. So if you forget what those mean, we're going to run the program and bring up Swagger, so that way we can review what these status codes mean. And you should be using Swagger because it will help you very much in knowing whether or not what you did was correct. Right, here's good old Swagger, and it says API Gaming Get. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and try it out and execute. Alright, see, it gave us a list of players, right? The username, level, etc., etc., etc. Notice how it says code 200 here, okay? 200 is success, meaning I got your information, everything went hunky-dory, here you go. So our API can have different status codes based on whether or not it was successful in fulfilling the request. So for example, you can have a 404 not found. You could have a 500, which is like there's a server error. We need to be able to communicate to the client whether or not the request was successful, whether or not we were okay in giving it to them. If we were successful in giving their request, we give it 200. There are other status codes in the 200 range that basically mean success, but like there's a caveat to it. You can go look those up online. 200 is the standard one for everything went hunky-dory, here you go. 500 means that we had some kind of like server error, and I'm sorry, you made a request, but we can't fulfill it at this moment. The reason you send back these status codes is because the client needs to know, like, what should they do? Like, just they make a request. It failed. Well, they have to have code on their side that handles failure. So we have to communicate with them using these status codes. All right. Another thing to remember is I think they wanted this named, so we're going to call this players. Remember, you can just use a parentheses and then name it, and I'll show you what that means in a second. So we're going to open up good old Swagger, and notice how it says API Gaming Players. This is the endpoint. Okay, I add that players was added because I put a parentheses and some quotes after get. So that way it said, hey, this specific endpoint is players. If you don't have anything there, it's just going to be API Gaming as the endpoint. The reason that is because at the very top on line 7, we said, okay, like this is an API controller, and what's its route? It's all going to start with API and then whatever the name of the controller is. In this case, the name of the controller is gaming, so it'll be API gaming, and then we added this here to make it players. Okay, cool. So now we've gotten all players, and now we can go on to the next thing, which is classes. Shocking. So we're going to an endpoint that returns all player classes. This is going to basically be exactly the same thing as the first one, except it will just return different objects. Okay, so public iActionResult. Okay, get all player classes. Method name should be descriptive, and then I'm just going to do return OK and put it all in one line like this. Okay, db.playerClasses. All right, sweet. Next one. This endpoint takes in a parameter of int level and returns back all players above or equal to that level. Alright, so we're going to do public. So it's still a get because they're requesting information. And the name of this endpoint was, what did they want? Players min level. Okay, players min level, great. There we go. Okay, we're going to do public iActionResult get players min level. It will take an integer int level. Alright, so how do we get all the players that are at a level or above? Now we're going to use link. Okay, link works on collections, lists are collections. So we're going to have a list of player. It's equal to db.players.where x.level is greater than or equal to level. And then we want back a list. This to list is important. Okay. Now some people are get tripped up with like the IE enumerable thing, the interface. That's nothing special. There's nothing like spooky about it. Lists have this interface. I don't know if we can see it. The SDK will show it to you, but let's see if we can go there. Yep, there we go. This is the class list. See how it has this interface as the IEnumerable interface. Okay, that's all. IEnumerable is an interface for things that are like countable, right? So that's all it means. There's no other meaning to it besides that. So we have a list of players. Okay, and then we're going to return this list. Return okay player list. Right. Remember, this where in link works just like SQL. Select all from players where level is greater than or equal to level. Okay, there's no different than doing this in SQL. SQL, you can have variables in SQL. All right, so you may say to yourself, but Jonathan, this is not a SQL database. Link doesn't care where your data comes from. It doesn't care if doesn't come from SQL, if it came from like some other like Postgres or whatever, or if it's just like a list of objects. All Link cares about is that you have a list, like you have a collection of data. So just keep that in mind. Okay, cool. Let's make sure it's all working. Okay, be sure to test your code often. Don't get too far ahead of yourself. Let's go here. All right, try it out. Let's do level 2. All right, level 100. So let's do. So basically, if I set the level to 80, I shouldn't see these two here. Great. It filtered them out. Looks good to me. All right, let's keep going. Players sort level. I'm just going to copy this. This endpoint returns all the players sorted by their level, highest level first. Okay, great. We're still doing gets because the client is still requesting information, so we're going to use a get. And we're going to get players, get all players sorted. Okay, we're going to, I mean, it pretty much did it for me. That's kind of eerie. They want it by level, right? Yep. So this will order by will sort them by their level. It's kind of creepy how good IntelliSense is getting. Okay, so we will get players sort level, take all the players, order them by their level, and get them to a list. Let's check to see if this works. You may be thinking, my gosh, Jonathan, you check a lot of things over and over and over again. I'm like, yes, this is what I do at my job. You have to make certain things work. It is part of what is expected of you as a developer. So let's go here. And then I want no parameters, so we're going to execute, and does it give it by their level, 75. So it does lowest to highest. All right. So what did they want? Did they want highest to lowest, or what did they want? Highest level first. All right, so we're going to have to switch up the way. We're going to do a different one. Order by descending. Okay, so order by will go from lowest to highest, and then order by descending is the opposite. So it'll go from highest to lowest. Okay, let's take a look. Let's try it out. Hit execute. Okay, 100, 90, 80, 75. Fantastic. Okay, it does highest to lowest. Sweet. Alright, let's keep going. Players of class. This endpoint will take in a string and search for all players with that player class name. Alright, that makes sense. Okay, so we're still requesting information, so we're still using get. Okay, public by action result, get players by class, string class. Lowercase, I don't think it will like that yet. You can't, let's do player class. That's a reserved word. There we go. Alright, so I want to get all the players by a specific class. So let's do list player. Again, you could do this on one line if you want to be like fancy. I'm just doing it on multiple lines so you can see what's going on. If you do it on one line, it might be hard for you to read, but if you want to do this all in one line, that's hunky-dory. So let's do db dot players, all right, dot where x dot, let's see, is it username? Okay, so it looks like I want to get their class, players of this class. All right, so we're going to do this in 2 steps actually. So I'm going to comment this out for right now. I need to get the class, so let's pseudo code first. Get the class by its name. Take the name, get the class by its name. If it exists, then get all players with the player class with that ID. Because ID is the way by which we know the player class. Like each player class has a unique ID, so that's the way we'll be able to differentiate them. All right, so we're going to first get the class by its name. So player class C, well, PC equals db dot player classes dot where x dot name dot to lower equals player class dot to lower first or default. All right, let's go over this. So first off, I just did to lower to make sure that they type in something like with a weird case, it gets normalized. So I take the name to lower and compare that to what they put in. First or default means, hey, give me the first one you find. If you don't find it, give me null. Okay, I'm going to repeat that. First or default means, hey, give me the first one that you find that fits this criteria. If you can't find any, make this null. Okay, so if PC equals null, which it's possible, because we don't know what they're going to put in. We don't know what player class is. We're asking the user for information, and we don't trust the user. So there may be a case where we don't know what they give us. So we're going to just return not found, which means, hey, I looked for the thing you asked me for, and I have no idea. Okay, then we can keep going. So we found the player class. So now let's get all the players who have a player class ID. So x dot player class ID equals pc dot id dot to list, because there could be more than one of them. Okay, remember, first or default or singular default are for when we we only want one or only expect one. To list is when we expect more than one. So there's a possibility. There's players. We type in like mage. There could be 10 mages. We don't know. So we're going to get a list of them, and we're going to return player list. We're going to do an OK player list, because OK means everything went hunky dory. All right. So one thing I do want to double check. So technically speaking, if there are any players without a player class ID, so players, all of them. Where was the constructor for this? So last one's player class ID. So there are some players without a player class. I mean, that's fine, I guess. Yeah, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3. These two don't have one. Okay, I always check the data. So it's still not really a big deal, because they will just be skipped, so not a big deal. All right, so let's do a test. I'm going to go look at my GameDB again. If I type in Archer, oh, this is 0. Oh, they do have one. Typically 0 means there isn't one, but that's fine. If I type in Archer, I should get Gamer and Jeffrey. Yeah, for you guys, this is not SQL, so this is just like some classes that they typed in, so. Alright, so if I type in Archer, I get Gamer and Jeffrey. Alright, sweet. Because they have a player class ID of 0. Fantastic. Alright, let's keep going. Alright, players of type. This endpoint will take in a string and search for all players with that player class type. Alright, what is a player class type? Let's take a look. Alright, again, we're still getting information. That part hasn't changed. Public, action result, get players by type. String, player type. Cool. Alright, let me go look at, I don't know what the player type is. Level username, is that in the class? I guess the class has the type. What does that mean though? Oh, like damage, support, okay, that makes sense. Like they do damage, or they heal, or they're the tank. Okay, so great. So we're gonna do the player type, and so it's basically the same pattern as this get player by class. We're doing the same thing. So we need to find the class with the type. db.playerclasses.where x dot type to lower and then thank you IntelliSense. You just know what to do. Here we go. So now I get the player class that has that type. If player PC equals null, meaning it didn't find it, then we can just tell the client that we didn't find it. Sorry, I have no idea what that is. And by the way, it's a 404, not found as 404. So look at a 404 because I don't know. They type something in like, I don't know, bicycle. And I'm like, there is no type of bicycle, so I don't know what that means. Alright, so the next one is I want a list of players. db.players.where x dot, let's see, so player class ID equals pc.id dot to list. Okay, and then we're going to do return okay player list. Alright, so these will be the players of that type. Let me double check that. So the type is in the player class. Right, it's basically the same thing as the other one. Alright, so I'm going to look and say I want to get damage. I should get Grand Chirpus, Jeffrey, and Funny Frog if I do damage. Alright, so let's run it. Let's type in damage. I got Gamer and Jeffrey. Let's see. Did I do the right one? This is damage. Okay, players of type. Alright, let's see. Should be 3. Blink, blink, blink. Let's see where I messed up. Okay, so I typed in damage. Because let's debug. Right, execute. Okay, we'll stop here. So the player class is name archer type damage. Oh. Archer's damage. Ah, my fault. See? That's why you need to look at the data. The class, there's 3 different classes that do damage. So actually is not the same. I want a list of player classes. Because there's more than one of each type. Well, here's why I missed that. So let's turn this dot to list. Okay, I just thought that I wasn't even paying attention to that. So archers do damage, wizards do damage, thieves do damage. Sweet. Okay, so that makes sense. So I want a list of player classes that do damage. So now if we go to here, that means that there is a list of IDs that we could do. So a couple ways we could do this. So there's a couple ways we could do. We could do the for loop. I'll show you a couple ways we could do this. So we could instead make this a player class ID list and get a list of integers. I'm going to get rid of this if statement right here. And then I'm going to select just their ID. So what I'm doing with select is I'm saying I don't care about the other columns, I just want the IDs of all the player classes that fit the criteria. And give me a list of them. Then, for instance, it can give you a list. This could return a list, like say, like if I put damage in, it will give me a list that says 0, 3, and 4. Then I want to check the basically, I want any player whose ID is 0, 3, or 4. So what I could do is where x PCID list dot contains player class ID. So basically I get a list of IDs that are of this type. Let's say I put damage, I would get 0, 3, and 4 as all valid IDs. Then I say I want any player where this list, 0, 3, 4, contains that player's class ID. So that means any player whose class ID is 0, 3, or 4. Let's take a look and see if this works. Alright, let's give it a try. I'm going to do damage. And I'm also going to put some breakpoints so we can see what, so you guys can visualize what I'm talking about. So I'm going to do execute. Okay, it will stop here. Remember, the debugger does not evaluate the line it stops at. It stops before that. So as you can see, this is an ID list, and there's like 0, 3, and 4. These are each integers. They're not the player class. Remember, I use select. Select means I don't care about the other data. I just care about the IDs. Just give me those. So it gives me a list of those IDs, and then let's see if it does the rest. Alright, I got Gamer, Jeffrey, and Funny Frog. Alright, that's much better. Cool. All played classes. The endpoint will filter through the players and return all current classes being used. The return list should not return duplicates. This should not return thief. Okay, so let me see what they mean by that. Let's get started with the preliminary stuff. So we're still doing get. We pretty much have done that the whole time. We're not changing any information. Get all played classes. And I guess there's no input, so that's fine. Alright, so what do they mean? It will filter through all the players and return all current classes with no duplicates. So that means that, what does that mean? So that means that this dude is a healer? Okay, that's the player class. So this dude's a healer. Let's make notes for myself. This dude's a healer. This dude's an archer. Brother man here is a knight. This dude is also an archer. And this dude is a wizard. That's what they mean by there's no thief, right? Nobody's a thief. So basically, if I do this correctly, I should get back a list that just has healer, archer, and knight. And wizard. Wizard, archer, knight, and healer. And there should only be one archer. Do they want to list a string, or what do you want? Return all current classes. They want the class. They want the full class. Alright, let's give it a go. Okay, so we're going to do db var all current classes is equal to db dot players dot I want to select just their classes. Oh, alright, so we could just get a couple ways we could do this. So I'm thinking I go to my players and I get like a list of their classes and make it distinct. Yeah, so we'll get their player class ID and then do distinct. That way there's no duplicates. And then basically so this is the all the IDs of the player classes that the players have with no duplicates. So distinct will get rid of the duplicates. Then what I want to do is get return all the player classes where their ID is in the aforementioned list. It's kind of the same strategy as this one. Alright, so we're going to do var so let's actually change this name of this variable because it's not correct anymore. Player class ID list. Okay, all played classes is equal to db dot player classes dot where x player class ID list. Come on, IntelliSense, help me out here. Dot contains x.id dot to list and return all played classes. Okay, all played classes. Alright, so if I did this correctly, I should get archer, knight, wizard, and healer. And there should not be two archers. Let's give it a go. All play classes, and then let's try it out. Archer, healer, knight, wizard. Great. Okay, and no duplicate of archer. All right, fantastic. Okay, so last thing, if you want to do this asynchronously, the logic's the same. The asynchronous does not like change the logic of anything. Like, let's say I wanted to change this and make it asynchronous, which is, I mean, fine if you want to get the practice. So you still do this part the same. So we're going to do public async cast iAction result get players. The only big thing you have to remember is, like, if you're going to do like a list. Actually, this was not one I should have picked. Should pick one that had a list in it. So let's uncomment this. Let's take this one because there's a list here. So async task iAction result. Okay, so this still works just fine. The only thing you really have to would normally change is you make it to list async and then add the await keyword in front of it. Okay, you might have to add, and I think you have to add entity framework actually in order to make this work. So let's not even bother with that. Okay, not really worth it. Again, it doesn't add anything to what we're doing because our database is basically a class list. All right, so hopefully this made some sense. I just went through my logic. You might be able to do some of these in a different way, like with for loops. But like I said, as long as you get the data out by the end of the day, that's what's the most important thing is. Well, this was helpful, and see you guys in class.